This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
He is credited with transforming banking in Kenya, from an exclusive service to an accessible and essential service. He says he has the formula and tools to avail financial services to all parts of the African continent.
We have learned the lessons. We know what works. We have the capability to leapfrog on technology.
Tens of awards later, he keeps his eyes on the prize.
We are doing things with an objective that is people-centered.
He built Equity Group from an unknown building society in the 80s to one of Africa's top banks with assets in excess of $8 billion. He's also giving thousands of students the wings to fly.
Education is the only way for all our children.
We speak to Dr. James Mwangi, the man at the helm of the Equity Group. How far can he replicate his success? In just 36 years, Equity Bank has grown from an insolvent building society in rural Kenya to a top 10 lender in the continent. It is the second largest bank in Kenya by capitalization and in terms of deposits. It is also the fastest growing bank in the region and now boasts the widest reach with operations in South Sudan, Uganda, Rwanda, Tanzania and the DRC. In this episode of BizTalk, join me, Penny Nakaribe, as I talk to the man at the helm, the man behind all the transformation, Dr. James Mwangi, and why he says he's not about to slow down. Had it been up to him, James Mwangi, the Group Chief Executive of Equity Group Holdings, would at this time have finalized an acquisition deal with London-based Atlas Mara. That would have cemented the bank's position as the largest in terms of branch network in the East African region. It was an elaborate deal. Equity Group would have acquired 62% of Bank Populaire du Rwanda and all of Atlas Mara subsidiaries in Zambia, Tanzania and Mozambique, essentially 100% of the African banking cooperation in the three countries. In exchange, Atlas Mara would have obtained a 6.3% stake in Equity Group. Discussions were advanced, having started in April 2019.
The only thing COVID did was to bring too much uncertainty. And we said it was good to pause and see the outcomes, how COVID would affect the economy, because there is no point of openly flying into a storm. So we chose to study the storm of COVID before we could take up another set of banks.
The bank opted to preserve capital. Besides withdrawing from the Atlas Mara deal, it also took back a proposed dividend payout of about $87 million.
So prudence dictates that banks prepare in advance. If nothing happens, then you don't regret for having been prudent. You would better say, yes, I was overcautious, other than regret. So that is what's happening in the bank. The last one is that banks have chosen, and Equity has read these, we have restructured up to 45% of the loans to keep the rights of the economy on. We chose to create moratoriums for the period of COVID to enable the banks, the businesses, one, to support the livelihoods of their employees and their owners. And in the process, we have forgiven them the monthly loan repayments. And that alone, we need to recognize that that doesn't remove the obligation of paying depositors.
Like with most organizations across the world, the coronavirus has dented the group's balance sheet. From a consistent growth of over 100% over the last 19 years, the group recorded a 14% decline for the 9 months to September 2020. The group reported $136 million. But in the pandemic, Mwangi sees lessons, albeit difficult, that needed to be learned. He's among 14 chief executives globally who've committed to champion an inclusive and sustainable economy.
We thought we had a resilient, sustainable world, but it's now clear to everybody that truly we must have missed something. The worst of the global economy was exposed. Massive inequalities, unsustainable business models, and an resilient world that cannot even overcome the shock of a virus. And essentially then we said we really need to advocate a purpose-first world, a purpose that thinks about communities, a purpose that ensures nobody is left behind, a purpose that ensures that the massive inequalities that have existed should be addressed, and a purpose that makes humanity the center of everything. And it's for that then we wished to advocate for purpose first, such that we don't reconstruct the world after COVID, but we rebuild afresh, to build it in a way that will create a resilient world, a more equitable world, and a more sustainable world.
See, the question is, even before there was this pandemic, we were already talking about massive inequalities, and not just in the continent, but in so many other economies around the world. And now you're talking about not building back the economy, but building it better. How do you achieve that?
I think that is why purpose comes first, such that it becomes really the driving inspiration. That we are not just doing things, but we are doing things with an objective that is people-centered. It's where we ensure that we bridge the mistrust, particularly between the commercial world and communities. We've seen a situation where the commercial world and capitalism, for that matter, had lost faith and trust of communities. And we have seen an aggression where communities have really enhanced regulations to tame and to punish the commercial world. And essentially we are saying that is not a sustainable way, it's not resilient. However, the greatest exposure came with COVID, and we saw the disruption of global supply chains. We saw what one would call priority mentality, that it's me first, it's a part of our world. We could see that medical facilities could not be distributed based on needs. It was based on selfish protection policy. And it's for that reason that we said that is not a sustainable world. It's not a resilient world. Data now reflects that more than 100 million people have fallen into absolute poverty in a world with plenty. So those are the evils that have been exposed of the world that we were living in. But now we are saying, let's not just talk about it. Let's systematically address the challenges.
When we come back, we look at the group's growth so far and the plans to replicate its model in other countries in Africa.
We're looking at 100 million customers in 5 years. Whichever countries they come from, we intend to have 100 million customers. We're very lucky that digitization has made this practically possible.
.360-degree profiles of industry movers and shakers, tech mavericks, and policymakers. We drill down on their success. We ask how they set strategy and how they navigate in an increasingly competitive market. Real talk, real business. Join the conversation. BizTalk, only on CGTN.
Equity Bank now has 173 branches in Kenya and another 110 spread across Uganda, Tanzania, South Sudan, Rwanda, and the Democratic Republic of Congo. The bank has also established a representative office in Ethiopia. Expansion has for a long time been part of the group's strategy.
We're looking at for 15 countries, but we're broken down that countries are just imaginary boundaries. We're looking at 100 million customers in 5 years. Whichever countries they come from, we intend to have 100 million customers. We're very lucky that digitization has made this practically possible. We don't have to have brick and mortar infrastructure, which would have been the most limiting factor. Essentially, if you look, we have used a clipping approach in our expansion. So given a chance, Ethiopia would be a very ideal country. And of course, as was reflected when we had bid for a Transmala transaction, we were extending on the boundaries of Tanzania to Mozambique and Zambia. Essentially, we are tracking ourselves along the trade routes in the region. So DRC, Lubumbashi, is served by the port of Mozambique and the port of Tanzania. So essentially, we were linking the trade routes.
Mwangi says that the bank's transformative model is ideal for the continent at the moment. He's not only betting on it to grow the bank's balance sheet, but he sees economies being transformed and the realization of the Africa Rising narrative. The Democratic Republic of Congo, for instance, has a special place in his heart.
DLC has given us a flash back into history. DRC has only 6% of its population banked. So it is like Kenya in the 80s. So we have been given another opportunity. This time to replay what we did in Kenya, but not in 30 years, but in under 10 years. And that is why I believe in 5 years, DRC will be bigger than Kenya, because we have learned the lessons. We know what works. We know what doesn't work. We have the capital. We have the capability to leapfrog on technology. And so we want to replay and become more relevant in a country that is the most needed country, maybe in the world, given that a majority of the people are excluded. And we hope to make a contribution to solving the paradox in DRC of being the most endowed country on earth in natural resources, and on the other side, having people enjoying the lowest quality of standard of living. That paradox needs to be solved. And I'm a strong believer that Africa can benefit by supporting DRC, because if DRC transforms, Africa will become transformed.
What would you say is Equity's competitive advantage when it comes to banking in the region?
The biggest competitive advantage of Equity is customer experience. And our customer experience is not based on banking products. It's based on treating people with honor and dignity. That is what truly differentiates Equity. The second one is opening the door for everybody. We are not a niche bank. We don't, we segment the market, but we have a product and a service and a channel for all. Nobody is left behind. So we are relevant to everybody. And there is no other bank in the world that is as inclusive as Equity. Just live around the region. And lastly, is affordability. We believed in a model that with huge volume and low margin. So we are more affordable. And if you look at competition consistently for the last 10 years, we have been ranked the most affordable bank, or the bank with the lowest charges, as the award leads.
It is difficult to project Equity's growth without a look at its history. It grew on the promise of making banking accessible to a then excluded population.
Back in the 80s, my village of Nyagatogo had nobody who had a bank account. That's how bad it was. That's how much exclusion it was. Banking was a crab. A villager in Nyagatogo would then be asked that if they were to open a bank account, they must be introduced. But they didn't know anybody who could introduce them, because there was nobody in the village with a bank account. So you could see how bad the barriers were. The second thing was the issue of minimum balance. I remember when I got my first job in the late 80s, I was earning only 4,000 Kenya shillings. But the minimum balance that had been set by the banks was 10,000. So I was expected to keep nearly 3 months of my salary as a minimum balance in the bank, not earning anything, but being charged ledger fee on monthly basis. It was a balance that had to keep on replenishing on monthly basis. And essentially, it was not just minimum balance. Banking opened up at 9 and closed at noon. You are only given 3 hours to access your money. And if you needed more than 10,000 Kenya shillings, you needed to give 2 weeks notice. And if you went to the bank once a week, you couldn't go to the bank again that week because you needed to go to a bank only after 7 days.
A trained accountant, Mwangi joined Equity Bank in 1991 on invitation from other directors to help save the building society that was losing about $60,000 annually and had accumulated losses of about $380,000.
But we had a dream that we could be able to create a banking solution for our people. So it was passion and enthusiasm that gave us way. But given that we were technically insolvent, nobody would trust us with capital. So we agreed that among ourselves, we would gradually fund ourselves by being paid 25% of our salaries with shares. Shares of which did not have value, but we believed in the future. We're making a sacrifice for a better future. Looking back, for every share that we were issued at that time, we have now been issued 600 shares through spirits and bonuses. But flashing back, what did we do? We democratized banking. We drove banking from a service perspective. We brought honor and dignity to banking. And the people said we had given banking a human face. We had humanized banking. And we realized that it's not what people don't appreciate most what you give them, it's how you treat them. And that then became the beginning of Equity today. After 15 years, we were able to reach a threshold that we could convert ourselves into a commercial bank regulated by the central bank and give confidence more. So from 2000, we kept on growing, attracting. At one point in 2004, that triggered a massive advocacy among the people. We had adequately differentiated ourselves from the other banks, and people then talked about us, and people started coming in big numbers.
The rest, as they say, is history. When we return, developing future leaders, the group is actively investing not just in its future, but the future of all the countries in which it operates. We look at the group's Wings to Fly program.
The most transformative asset of the mind is knowledge. We must be very good in turning information into knowledge, and we must be very good in applying knowledge so that we can pick the insights, so that we can reduce the pain of failure.
Each day, there are millions of stories. Each one can open new perspectives, new possibilities. Wherever you look, we are there. To see, discover, explore. We put the pieces together to find what really matters to you, all around the world, all around the clock. Our reporters are at home across the globe. From our headquarters in Beijing and production centers in Washington, Nairobi, and London, China Global Television Network. Stories from across the globe, reaching people across the globe. CGTN. See the difference.
Your Excellency, Lucrine have survived and learned out of 7 forced marriages, yet she still remains fully determined. Education is the only way for all our children.
Former Kenyan President Mwai Kibaki, unable to contain himself on hearing some personal stories of beneficiaries of the Wings to Fly program. And the stories are many.
I have been in the streets for the last 6 years since I dropped out of school.
I was once a street child.
Established in 2010, the Wings to Fly program is part of the Equity Group Foundation's activities. It identifies bright children from needy families for scholarships in secondary schools, universities, and other tertiary institutions. Without such support, many of these children would not have a chance at education and the success that comes with a good education.
I thank Equity Bank. Thank you, James Mwangi, for believing in the possibilities of all these young people.
I'm very passionate about education, because if it was not for education, I'm not sure I would be here with you. The most transformative asset of the mind is knowledge. And knowledge is acquired to a great extent through formal learning. Of course, there is, you can't say people who are not formally educated don't learn. You can learn. We learn all from all and sharing. But if we really want to transform ourselves, we must be seekers of information. We must be very good in turning information into knowledge, and we must be very good in applying knowledge so that we can pick the insights, so that we can reduce the pain of failure. So having said that, I'm sure you might be aware that I came from a very humble background, and the community had to build a bridge for me to be able to access education. And looking back, every time I'm walking around the country, every child, needy child I see a young James Mwangi in them. And I remember community build a bridge for me through scholarships and sponsorships. And every day I think of building bridges for children so that they can realize their aspirations.
So will these bridges go beyond Kenya as Equity expands into the region?
The bridges will go across the boundaries. We're now starting Wings to Fly in Uganda, Rwanda, and DRC, because we have seen that to have been the most impactful and transformational project. From a humble beginning of one scholarship in 1998, that has produced our managing director in Uganda, we now have nearly 40,000 kids having gone through or going through the Wings to Fly program. We have 16,000 scholars in our public universities, and we have 663 scholars in global universities, with Harvard having the highest number of 36. That, to me, needs to be repeated in every country that we have a presence in, because truly, if we don't invest in young people, we are busy deconstructing our future. We can only construct our future by investing in young people. And the best investment we can give young people is knowledge.
Having grown up in a humble background, like you said, how do you think that has influenced you as an individual, and also your style of leadership as you steer the company?
Human beings are a creation of practices and an environment. My late mother, Grace Wairimo, brought 7 kids as a widow. And one of the things she taught us is sharing what was available, was to manage our greed and serve food based on ensuring everybody got a piece from the pot, her cooking pot. And essentially, that today looking back has influenced me a lot about sharing and shared prosperity. The equity model today is all about shared prosperity. The equity model is about inclusion. We never left any of our siblings when we were sharing food. We shared to ensure everybody got a piece, not to feel our needs. So you can see how much that has influenced. So we are a creation of our experiences. And I must say how privileged I've been to have been part of the equity story, because It has shaped the person I am. And every day, the successes of equity inspires me on the possibilities of the future, where success is within our reach, because that which we can conceive, we can always deliver.
You've achieved a tremendous amount of success, won very many accolades. When you turn down the lights in this office and you finally go home at night and you lay down in your bed, do you think, yes, Dr. Mwangi, I have accomplished everything? Is there something you're yet to do that you feel, I haven't yet done this, I would like to do this?
I live a life of gratitude because I've been very privileged, like you said, to be given an opportunity to be part of the great success, not just of equity, but of also this country, making my contribution. The great success of Nyakatogo village, which I'm proud to belong to, and see Nyakatogo Secondary School to become what it is. But I think that is about the past. Every time I sleep, when the lights are off, I imagine of how the future should look like.
And what do you see?
And how much more contribution I can make. I see a more equitable world, a more fairer world in allocation of opportunities. Inequality speaks of lack of opportunities. So, and that is why I'm obsessed with supporting SMEs, so that as they seek to create wealth, they create opportunities for our young people to get jobs. They create opportunities for our producers to get markets for their products. That is what awakens me every evening, to see how much more needs to be done. And I only pray for good health so that and long life, so that I can hopefully continue to be part of a team that continues to make me very, very proud that when we were given a moment, we rose to the occasion and we did everything we could. The only thing I know, I have no regrets. I feel for every moment, I apply myself fully and I do what I have to do. And that's why our results always follow us.
And finally, is Dr. Mwangi all work and no play?
Not truly, because as you said, we say in the evening we'll shut the office. So James Mwangi is a family man with a loving wife, Jane, and 3 boys. And maybe I'm happiest as a family man at home. James is a spiritual person, so I cherish moments spending with my bishop and the pastor, seeking not just to serve man, but to serve God. It's very fulfilling when you serve family, you serve community, and you serve God. Then you feel fulfillment and completeness of a life. So James is many things in one.